before jobs and kids. She was mine and I was her maid of honor. We've always been united. Ken and my husband have grown close over time. They bonded over athletics and found much in common. My spouse and Ken, a metal worker on their acreage, a techie who plays with electronics, spend hours at Ken's store drinking beer and discussing life and work. In their free time, they fish and help each other renovate their homes. Our extended family now includes Alice's brilliant 12-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. Ken has been her father since she was 4, and he clearly adored her. My husband and I have always treated her like a niece and include her in our vacations and holidays. Ken told Alice he wanted a divorce over a month ago. Alice was distraught when she told me, and her eyes showed it. She admitted their marriage had struggled for 6 months. She blamed Ken's employment issues for the conflict. Alice got promoted at her company 3 years ago, which was a big step up and a lot of responsibility. Despite her hard work, this advancement required her to travel 3 or 4 months a year. Weekends, early mornings, late nights. She seemed always on time. She has always been successful and motivated, climbing the corporate ladder with tenacity I admire. Ken is a skilled carpenter. He runs a metal shop on their land full-time. Though different, his duty is just as difficult. Clients, projects, and his own business keep him busy. I wouldn't call her the breadwinner. Though they contributed greatly to their home, their relationships had changed. Alice told me Ken had grown more vocal about his dissatisfaction with her employment. He felt disregarded, like her career came before their relationship. He often pressured her to find a new job or one with less travel and responsibility. She kept putting it off in hopes that he would forget, but she always stated she would think about it. They grew apart due to constant fighting. After Alice extended a work trip without asking Ken, the problem intensified. She forgot about the family vacation they planned for her homecoming. Ken felt disregarded, and her priorities were clear. She returned from the long journey to find Ken packing and storing most of his shop and tools. Until then, he had pretended everything was fine and not told her he was leaving. It was her call. I called Alice, who was upset. I didn't think he'd do it, she said, time after time. Her initial sadness turned to wrath when Ken said reconciliation was impossible. His relationship had soured since Alice acquired the new job, and he had reached his limit. He thought they had ceased doing anything together as a family, that Alice avoided him when she was away, and that she preferred to socialize with her coworkers. Nothing remained of their sexual lives. She dismissed him whenever he worried. The protracted work trip crystallized Ken's anger. He felt unwelcome and ignored. Alice's ambition and success were separating them. Alice's irritation was evident as she informed me. She was torn between her failing marriage and her passion for work. She refused to choose. Ken seems to have chosen her. Everything got worse after a certain incident which I can't mention without flinching. Ken and Alice were apart for 3 weeks. Alice stayed in their previous house, and their daughter alternated between Ken's place and theirs. Ken always took their daughter home on Sunday nights, and this was his weekend with her. Alice binge-drank and forgot the day. Sunday looked like Saturday to her. When Ken and their daughter arrive, chaos ensues. Alice has 2 young men. They were drunk in the hot tub. What was happening was evident despite their inaction. The scene was chaotic. Alice was inebriated and unable to think, throwing clothes around and empty bottles. Alice panicked as Ken entered. She cursed at Ken and shouted it wasn't Sunday. Her words and motions were sloppy. The younger men packed up, looking nervous. Ken quickly took her back to his pickup while staying calm to save their child from seeing the worst. He kept his cool for his daughter despite his rage. Alice kept losing her anger. She yelled charges and profanities, oblivious of the day. Damage was done. But Ken got their kid out without her seeing too much. Alice has no recollection of the next day. She woke up with a headache and sketchy memories of the night before. Ken received terrible SMS when she got fucked. The messages were filthy, harsh, and personal. After Ken showed them to him, my husband showed me. They stated something personal, but I won't say what. Deep, unforgettable things. In her drunken texts, Alice labeled Ken a failure, stated he never loved her, and criticized his masculinity. She seems to have let out all her anger and fury in a flood of harsh remarks. Texts like this damage my heart. Alice, I didn't know. Her downward spiral affected everyone around her. The encounter changed Ken. To punish her, he went nuclear. He wanted child support, full custody of their daughter, and the house. He was also mad. He finished. Alice's actions realization affected her greatly. She apologized. But the damage was too tremendous. Ken insisted there was no turning back. Despite all the turbulence, their daughter wanted to stay with Ken because she felt safer and more stable. This isn't Alice, I know. She's struggling. It's almost all she has, and she needs friends. That evening, Alice's intoxication and terrible decisions hid her internal battle, a desperate call for help. This moment of weakness had severe consequences for everyone. Her daughter prefers Ken. My best friend and I won't break up over this. The issue? Spouse wants us to break up. His statements about her were horrible. I know she loves her daughter, yet he called her shitty mother, he called her self-centered effing bee. He says he doesn't want me engaged in her drama and activities. He shuts it down every time I tell him she'll change and needs treatment now, saying this is who she is, and that he doesn't see why I want to be around her. I know he's protecting his pal and that Ken's stories are mostly lies. I know they were tight for years. He loves Ken. For me, it's different. Alice and I have a long history before we met our spouses. Although I don't condone her acts, I find it absurd that he would ask me to break off my best friend. Alice has recently requested many dates with me. She is struggling and lonely. I went once without telling my spouse since I knew what he would say. Really, I just wanted to talk to her face to face to see if I could help. When I informed him we met, he broke down. I hid things from him, as he alleged, but I knew he wouldn't understand. He stressed that we'd have issues if I didn't block her. I feel trapped in his sand line. On one side is my 10-year supporter, my spouse. My sister-like best friend Alice is on the other side. Cutting her out feels like betraying myself. Part of my past and ours. This upgrade is unpleasant. I scheduled a Saturday morning meeting with Alice. Before her work trip on Monday, I would deliver coffee and help her with chores. I wanted to let her know that her family and I care about her well-being and want her to be happy, despite her recent behavior. I hoped we could have an honest chat. I would contact my friend, and she would consent to treatment, and that she will move constructively. No such thing happened. She acted angrily when I arrived at her place, possibly understanding my intentions before I spoke. Early warning indicators included her brusqueness and defensiveness. She rejected my concern for her, saying she was fine and enjoying herself. She said she deserved to rest after all her hard work, especially since Ken was gone. Her defiance was palpable. She complained about Ken's ingratitude over the years despite her efforts and donations. She described herself as the martyr in their relationship, listing all she had done and paid for him. Her out-of-character speech made me shudder. She was always strong and independent. Now, she seemed to be changing their past for her fiction. Ken works hard and doesn't need her money. He was the main provider when they started dating, helping Alice rise in the company. Even though she makes more than him, he wasn't financially dependent on her. Respect and mutual accountability have always underpinned their partnership. She was defending her recent acts by portraying herself as the victim who had been ignored. However, I knew Ken supported her career objectives during good times and bad. The pain and wrath of their breakup clouded her perception. I tried to reason with Alice, but she still refused. I kept getting justifications for her behavior when I sought to talk about her health. She claimed she was having fun and deserved it after what she had been through. She appeared to be persuading herself as well as me. Her aggression left me stunned. My friends said Alice was undoubtedly cheating on Ken. My inquiry was to her. Her face flushed with hurt and wrath as she grew defensive. She shouted, "I can't believe you'd even ask me that," attitude, as if my idea was a betrayal. I mentioned the hot tub, the vent's unattractive appearance. Redrew the image. Ken and their daughter entered the hot tub with two drunken younger males. Scene was rife with scandal. Alice denied cheating. She said it was a fun night with no wrongdoing. When I asked for their names, she said they were interns at her workplace. She made the admission without a fuss. When I asked their age, my stomach turned. What said she? They were legal. The way she said it made me shudder. It sounded what a filthy old man would say about younger women, cold and scornful. Disgusting and disturbing. I disliked her. Flipping. She seemed to be downplaying the whole thing. The incident Ken stepped into and her cavalier description of these interns were unnerving. I suspected there was more to the story than she was telling. She may have cheated before the separation. I've forgotten a lot about her. Longtime buddy and confidant felt like a stranger. She was so different from Alice I knew in words, behavior, and manner. She had transformed into someone I couldn't recognize or understand. I was challenged throughout this journey. Her behavior made it tougher for me to help her through this difficult period. Things changed unexpectedly here. When we spoke, she was packing for business vacation. I asked where she was going this time. Dallas, she said. I didn't think much. She frequently visits Dallas for business. Her packing attracted my eye, though. Beanie, hiking boots, sweaters, long pants, and jackets. She was dressed for October, not Dallas. Dallas was still warm, so her attire seemed nonsensical. Perhaps I never observed her packing labor clothes. Which was even more puzzling given her vacation explanation. The oddest part? An odd Seattle Mariners jersey. Baseball doesn't interest Alice. She didn't. I was full with curiosity when I noticed that garment in her belongings. Why a baseball jersey for a Dallas business trip? It seemed odder when I thought about it. To understand this unusual packing list, I longed to ask her, But I kept quiet. I avoided being accusatory or intrusive, especially given her recent defensiveness. I tried to stay positive despite my pain. Alice moved rapidly, almost hastily, like she was packing. Her daughter's impending visit intensified the room's urgency. I let her handle things alone to avoid adding to her stress. We hugged before I left. I loved her and wanted her to be happy. I told her I hoped she would consider therapy after her trip. She looked at me with a mix of emotions and said, "I'll think about it. It was a small concession," but I clung to it, hoping it might lead to something positive. After her divorce, my best friend's life changed unexpectedly. My husband won't let me free her, even if I want to. My 38-year-old best friend and her 44-year-old husband are separating. They'll be Alice and Ken. After 11 years together, my 37-year-old husband and I have always been close to Ken and Alice. Alice and I were friends before we met our partners. College is when we met. Lived in dorm rooms and had many late-night study sessions with laughter and deep discussions. We traveled, celebrated each other's successes, and supported each other through breakups. He thought it was odd, too. We both found it strange, but other than it just being odd, we didn't think much of it at the time. But then, hubby went full internet detective. He was determined to figure out what was going on. After a bit of searching, he discovered something that made my heart sink. Guess who lives in Seattle and has a Facebook profile picture of himself at a Mariners game? Her daughter's biological father. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. When I checked the Mariners' schedule, they did have home games next week. I called Alice immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. When she picked up, I tried to keep my voice steady. Are you really going to Dallas? She said, "Yeah, why are you sure you won't see her ex in Seattle?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, probably a full minute of silence that felt like an eternity. I could feel the tension mounting. "Alice, you better not lie to me. I'll find out," I warned her. Finally, she came clean. She admitted that she had gotten in contact with him right after Ken left her and that they'd been talking more. And more. She claimed he was a different man now, that he had turned his life around. She launched into a spiel about how he had changed, how he was more responsible and stable now, how he wanted to be a part of his daughter's life again. But all I heard was blah blah. I was furious and heartbroken. This man had caused her so much pain in the past, and now she was letting him back into her life. After everything she had been through with Ken, the last thing she needed was to get involved with someone who had hurt her so deeply before. The fact that she had lied to me, that she had planned this whole trip under false pretenses, made it even worse. I didn't know what to say. I was filled with a mix of anger, disappointment, and fear for what this could mean for her and her daughter. I didn't talk about her baby daddy in the last post because it wasn't relevant. But just know this man is a piece of shit human being. He cheated on her while she was pregnant and kicked her out when she confronted him. He'd slap her around, call her terrible names, and degrade her in ways that no one should ever have to endure. This effing guy even had the audacity to say he wanted nothing to do with their child. When Alice finally reached out to me, desperate and broken, I didn't hesitate. I flew to Seattle, picked her up, and brought her home. She stayed with me for a bit, trying to piece her life back together. Those days were tough. Alice was a shell of herself, dealing with the trauma of abuse and the daunting task of raising a newborn alone. But Alice, being the resilient woman she is, slowly started to rebuild. She found strength in her daughter, who became her beacon of hope. Not long after moving in with me, she met Ken. He was a breath of fresh air, a kind, hard-working man who treated her with the respect and love she so desperately needed. Within a year of dating, they moved in together, and Ken embraced the role of a father to her daughter with open arms. He provided stability and affection, something Alice hadn't experienced in a long time. Ken was there for the milestones, her daughter's first steps, first words, and first day of school. He was the one who stayed up all night when she had a fever, who taught her how to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories. In every sense that mattered, he was her father. Their little family seemed perfect, a stark contrast to the nightmare Alice had escaped. Thinking back to those days, it's painful to see how far things have fallen apart. Alice went from being in a loving, supportive relationship to the mess she's in now. The memory of what she went through with her baby daddy only makes her current choices more baffling and worrisome. She knows firsthand the kind of person he is, yet she's letting him back into her life. It's like watching her walk back into a burning building. The thought of her daughter potentially being exposed to that man again is unbearable. She deserves better. Alice deserves better. But she's so lost right now, so blinded by her pain and confusion, that she can't see it. It's like she's forgotten the horrors of her past and is willing to risk everything for a man who never deserved a second chance. All of this makes me fear for her even more. I told her that of all the shit she's pulled recently, this was by far the worst thing she could do. My voice was shaking with anger and disappointment as I laid it out for her. I couldn't believe she would ever speak to that man, after what he did to her, and how he treated her. She kept saying it was years ago, that he had changed, and that he wanted to meet his daughter one day. But that didn't matter to me. The scars he left, both physical and emotional, were still fresh in my mind, even if she chose to forget them. When she said he wanted to meet his daughter, something inside me snapped. I started screaming and yelling into the phone so loud I think I blew out my voice. Are you out of your mind? After everything he did to you, to us. You're going to let him back into your life? Into your daughter's life? I was beyond furious, my anger fueled by years of witnessing her pain and suffering because of that man. I told her I was done with her. I told her if she gets on that plane to Seattle, to not bother contacting me ever again. I hung up on her. She called back and texted once. But I ignored it. I didn't have the energy for her anymore. I just sat on the couch crying all night while my husband held me. He didn't rub it in. He didn't give me an attitude. He just let me cry and told me he was sorry. Sorry that my best friend was making such destructive choices. Sorry that I was caught in the middle of this mess. I felt completely drained, emotionally and physically. The weight of my words and the finality of what I had said hung heavy in the air. This was the woman who had been my confidant, my rock, my sister in every way that mattered. And now I was watching her walk down a path that I knew would lead to nothing but more heartache and devastation. The realization that I might have lost her for good was almost too much to bear. I couldn't understand how she could be so blind, so willing to rewrite history for a man who had only brought her pain. The memories of helping her rebuild her life, of watching her grow stronger and more independent, now seemed distant and futile. It was like all the progress she had made was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My husband's arms around me were the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. Alice texted me this morning. She said she was sorry for lying to me, but that she's a big girl now and can look after herself. Her words were a slap in the face, a dismissive wave of her hand as she brushed off my concerns and our history. It was as if everything we had been through together, all the support I had given her, meant nothing. Her stubborn pride was leading her down a dangerous path, and there was nothing more I could do to stop it. I asked her if she was still going to Seattle. There was a part of me that hoped she might change her mind, that she might see reason and reconsider. But her reply was a simple, unyielding yes. That one word sealed the deal. I felt a mix of anger and sadness as I blocked her number. It was over. With a heavy heart, I told Ken everything. He was upset but not surprised. His eyes held a sadness that mirrored my own. He said he knew how close Alice and I were, and that he was sorry I'd lost my friend. His empathy was comforting, a small solace in the midst of the turmoil. I told him I was sorry he'd lost his wife, that the woman he had loved and supported had drifted so far from him. You guys were right. I feel like a fucking idiot. Maybe it's a little selfish of me, but I feel betrayed. I had invested so much into our friendship, had stood by her side through thick and thin, only to watch her throw it all away. The sense of betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound that I wasn't sure would ever fully heal. Alice's decision to reconnect with the man who had caused her so much pain was a betrayal, not just of our friendship, but of herself and her daughter. She was undoing all the progress she had made, and it was heartbreaking to witness. I felt powerless, knowing that I had done everything I could and still failed to save her from herself. The memories of our friendship, once a source of comfort and joy, now felt tainted by the recent events. Every laugh, every shared secret, every moment of support and understanding was overshadowed by her betrayal. It was a harsh reminder that sometimes, no matter how much you care for someone, you can't save them from their own choices. As I sat there, processing the end of our friendship, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, disappointment, and a lingering sense of guilt. Had I done enough? Could I have done more? These questions haunted me, even though I knew the answers wouldn't change the outcome. Alice had made her choice, and now I had to live with mine. I just lost a friend. A part of my life. My friend lost his wife, and worst, a kid just lost her mom. No matter how challenging life becomes, there will always be someone willing to extend a helping hand and guide you through your darkest times. Once you find such individuals, it is essential to cherish and maintain those relationships. Additionally, while work plays a vital role in our lives, it is crucial to balance professional responsibilities with family commitments. Your family serves as your sanctuary, a place of solace when external circumstances become turbulent. Failure to strike this balance may result in losing what you hold most dear. Prioritizing both your career and personal life is imperative for long-term fulfillment and stability. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. As I walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The bizarre packing choices, the evasive answers, everything felt wrong. But I didn't push it. I wanted to trust that Alice knew what she was doing, even though my gut told me otherwise. When I got home, hubby and I sat down to talk about how things went with Alice. I told him about the clothes she was packing: long pants, sweatshirts, a beanie, jackets, and hiking boots, and the random Seattle Mariners jersey.